With only weeks left of his final term, President Obama is still looking to fulfill his promise of closing Gitmo. But nearly a third of the former detainees are apparently returning to terror. 208 of the 693 detainees who were released from Gitmo are confirmed or at least suspected of returning to terrorism, according to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Well, Captain Chuck Nash, retired U.S. Navy captain and Fox News military analyst, is here to respond to all this. Captain Nash, a third, that's a lot of terrorists who could be doing harm out there, killing Americans.
It is. It's a pretty high recidivism rate, David. But when you look back and do it by the numbers, there were 780 at the high point under the Bush administration. He bequeathed 242 prisoners, or detainees, I should say, to President Obama, and now we're down to 59.
Right.
And on Monday, the Obama administration told Congress under law they have to, gave them 30 days notice, they want to release 17 to 18 more, which would leave us about 41, 42 prisoners, detainees left. And of that 41 to 42, 27 of them are so hardcore, nobody would think about letting those guys out.
But Captain Nash, I remember hearing that about the last time. The last time there was a big prisoner release, they said, oh, the ones who are left there are hardcore, we could never release them. And now we are. We're releasing some of those who back then were considered too hardcore to release.
Yeah, I don't know that what happens over time is these guys are evaluated periodically, and they look at three criteria. One is there a risk if we get this guy out of here that he's going to return to the battlefield? Is he a high risk? Two, is there any intelligence value left in him that we could continue to mine? And three, has he been a pain in the neck, or has he pretty much obeyed the rules? And they go through that process, and if they believe that they can transfer him, they transfer him to a facility outside of Guantanamo in another country.
I'm preaching a converted on this one, but you can obey all the rules and still be in your heart a terrorist. I mean, that's why these guys are different from normal criminals. And the other thing is who we're releasing them to. We're releasing them to places like Uruguay and Bosnia, who are very ill-equipped to handle potential terrorists, right?
Yeah, well, and some of the places that we're starting with this group anyway, and we have in the past, are the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, places that have internal security operations where these guys can be watched. Now, how closely are they watched? Probably not nearly as close as you or I would want them to be, but it keeps them in the confines of those countries. That doesn't mean that they're incommunicado.
Yeah, I guess, although there have been a couple that have sort of been lost. They can't find them anymore. But there's actually one who they were thinking of giving $100,000 to, and that's a whole other issue. But I want to get your take on something else if we can. We're currently waiting remarks from President Obama, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, after they held this really historic meeting in Pearl Harbor. First of all, talk to the meeting itself. It was Pearl Harbor that attacked us ruthlessly back in 1941. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, Prime Minister Abe is not the first Japanese Prime Minister to visit Pearl Harbor. Prime Minister Yoshido, back in 1951, just 6 years after the war, visited Admiral Radford, who at the time was the commander of the Pacific Fleet. And since then, there have been visits in 56 and 57. But that was before the 1962 opening of the Arizona Memorial. And that's where this visit's taking place. And it is most symbolic because the Arizona is the national memorial to Pearl Harbor.
Right. It's still a tomb for many of the men that went down with it.
It is indeed.
Now, a lot of concern on the part of the Japanese about what's happened with China, about what's happened with North Korea. Clearly, this administration, the Obama administration, has done nothing to quell the fears of Japan that they could be in the target sites of North Korea or run into trouble with China. Is there going to have to be a whole new reassurance campaign with the Japanese after Trump comes into the presidency?
I think so, and actions speak louder than words, although President-elect Trump seems to have a way with the words in conveying his thoughts. I believe that what happens is now you're going to see more exercises out there in the Pacific, and you know, the enmity that exists between the countries you mentioned, Japan, Korea, and China. This December, just on the 13th, marked the 79th anniversary of the rape of Nanjing, where 200,000 Chinese civilians were killed. And it was a disaster. Same thing with Korea. And these countries still are poking at each other, still very much dislike each other, even though now that the World War II is over and everything, Japan is our ally, not our enemy.
Well, they are still poking at each other with one big difference between them. Japan is the only one without nuclear weapons. And Donald Trump spoke to this point during the campaign. He said, now, wouldn't you rather, in a certain sense, have Japan have nuclear weapons when North Korea has nuclear weapons? What do you think of that remark?
I think the chemistry in the region between those three countries, were Japan to announce that they were beginning a nuclear weapons program, I think that would be extremely destabilizing. If they were to do something like that, they have to modify, and they are modifying, I believe it's Article 4 or Article 5 of their Constitution, which basically compels them to be defensive only. But if they were to open a program like that, they ought to do it like the Indians and the Pakistanis did it, which the way you find out about it is when they set off the first one.